Welcome to the Townsmen podcast, and today we're going to discuss how this project really came about, and we think it'd be a good idea to really go back a little bit and kind of talk about really our friendship and how our relationship when it came to just talking about truth, things that matter to us, really how it kind of morphed into what we see today and really kind of help us explain where we're trying to head as well. So kind of to start out, when it came to our friendship, one thing that always defined our friendship was that it wasn't necessarily the things that we did together. Mm-hmm. I played some sports growing up. I don't think you really did. No, went to different schools, lived about 15 minutes away from each other. Both met at church, different interests and whatnot, but really the one thing that I've always appreciated so much was your hunger and desire to know truth and to understand it, right? And to seek it and to really get a good grasp on reality, which, to be honest, is unique. I've been in the service for a few years, met a lot of different guys, and I'd say there are definitely guys like us around and people that are principled and matter of truth. But when it comes to conversations like this is just common practice for us, I would say, or, really some common things, which is very unique.
Yeah, I'd say it kind of has always been that way. We were always going on walks from I don't know how old we were, but too young to be walking around town by ourselves. But
in the middle of the night in some shady parts of town, but hey.
But hey, we wanted to walk around, and you could say we didn't know better. I don't know if that's entirely true. But yeah,
we didn't talk to strangers.
We didn't run into police. We didn't cause any trouble or nothing like that. We were just walking around having conversations and looking up at the stars, or if it was winter time, appreciating the snowfall on a new year or something like that. I remember one time walking around Ball Road back there. Was it Christmas Day or was it New Year's Day?
Probably New Year's Day.
I think it was Yeah. And it was just like those big, pretty fat flakes falling just softly down, no wind or nothing, just falling straight down. And I don't know, there's just always been moments like that you and I have always shared, and the conversations we've been able to share in moments like that, I don't know, they just formed me as a person in a way. I mean, obviously there's parts of both of us that were headed that direction already, but sharpening this in our friendship has been one of the best parts of my life.
Yeah, likewise. And what I appreciate is that it's very natural for us, the back and forth, the sharpening of well, have you thought about this? Maybe think about it this way, or I think you might be trying to articulate this, and that back and forth, and that it's been super helpful and edifying, I would say, at least in my life too, because, I have great friends that I love to do things with, but when it comes to these types of conversations, what I notice is it's not that they're inherently bad at it or don't want to do it. Maybe there isn't an encouragement or an emphasis or an ability or a place to exercise these types of conversations. There are some people that I do know, they've been doing it for just as long as we have, if not longer. Usually these are older folks, but hey, it is what it is. But I think when it comes to, our generation, to a degree, it was just something that wasn't really common, I would say.
Yep.
We grew up pretty similar, public school, all that stuff. What were the things that mattered? Well, what sports you played, or what grades you got, or who you were friends with who, and she said this, he did that, and whatnot. And, not saying that's inherently bad, but when it comes to fleshing out ideas, trying to have a worldview, like a coherent understanding of your reality, we were kind of lacking in that. And I think our friendship, I think God used our friendship to help us start putting some pieces together and start getting a framework that we can at least work out of. And now this is just to help other people do that, hopefully.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I think what drove a lot of it was and this sounds a little odd to say, but I do genuinely look at it this way, as I was fortunate enough to be a very sick kid. And I was able to suffer early, which, as far as I could tell, stripped away a lot of it might be necessary in childhood, and I've seen some side effects of having suffered early enough where it comes back to bite you as an adult, sure.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, it really just turned down the extra noise.
Help you focused on what mattered.
Yeah, and I think being able to talk through those things and think through those things, because I'd been thinking about them forever. You know, I had thoughts and ideas well above the ages that most people probably have some of those things. And, you know, getting to where I am as a person, where I am, if you could say so, spiritually, I would not be anywhere close to here had it not been for the ability to have those conversations with you.
Yeah, and that just harkens at the verse in Peter that I've always preached, having a reason for that hope that's within you. A lot of people have hope. A lot of people, unfortunately, are hopeless. But I think it's good to reason and to have that understanding of, like, well, why do I believe what I believe? What convictions do I have? Walk that dog out, see where it takes you, and does it hold water?
Yep.
And most importantly, does it give you an aim and a purpose in life? Is it valuable? Is it for the higher good?
Yep.
Because if it's for the higher good, I think then it immediately makes it for the common good, which that is what the essence we're trying to capture here.
Yeah.
And we kind of have a working mission statement.
Yeah.
If you want to share it, see.
Yeah.
We can kind of work through that and articulate it a little bit.
And here's what we've been trying to get developed for a couple months.
Yeah.
And it might not show that, obviously. It's a work in progress, but I think it's more in the direction than the exact results at this point. But it's what we're shooting for. But here so far is what we've got as a mission statement. Encourage individuals to investigate the truth for the sake of the good by exercising our inalienable right to free speech.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. And so the first, dare I say, clause or whatnot, encourage to investigate. All right. That's really kind of the first step, is encouraging people to investigate the claim. Far too often, I think there's a bit of a spoon feeding that we have sometimes of, well, this person said it, this expert, this professional, this professor, this whatever said this, and that's that. No, we can investigate the claim. Encourage people to investigate the claim as well. I think for some people, I think have a higher appetite for those things. Other people not so much, but nevertheless, we should be doing it. Especially as a free society, that at the end it says the inalienable right to free speech. That is how we as a people progress and get better. It's not to silence voices, but to let the people speak and to reason. Let us reason together, brothers. Let us understand and hopefully encourage people to investigate claims that are made and the convictions.
Yeah, it harkens back to the idea in the Bible, and you'll find it elsewhere, certainly, but that iron sharpens iron. Yeah, it's like, okay, you're pretty sharp and you've got some of your stuff together. If I'm allowed to say a little bit sharp at least. It's when those two things come together and give it their best effort and in good faith that nothing bad can really come of that. And a lot of this comes from really being somewhat dissatisfied with the way things had been going. And I'd had a sense of that since 2015-ish or so. Yeah. And even before that, I started questioning some of the things that I grew up believing in church and realizing that I'm not even sure that they understand what they're saying, because I don't understand it. Yep. And if they understand it, they're not conveying the level of understanding that they have, which caused me to question the whole thing. And I was an atheist there for a while because I was like, well, if that's what God is, I'm not on board. Yeah. That sucks. Yeah. Which took a couple years to come around and understand that, you know, maybe the depth that I had as a kid was not sufficient. My understanding of God was not high enough. And I could blame that on the church, on the church that I actually went to. I'm not saying the church in general. Right. And I think some of that may be warranted, but I think a lot of that is I was a kid. Yeah. And I couldn't understand it. I had the hunger to understand more, and I think my hunger for more led to things outside of the church, but inevitably I think I came back to my initial wiring, as you could say. I think all of us have that to some degree. Yeah. Some more than others. I wouldn't say there's any with none.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I could speak to that too, because we went to the same church, we grew up, been knowing each other for, man.
It's been a minute.
Like, and you said a decade and a half and some change. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while.
We're pretty close to 2 decades at this point.
Yeah. Might as well. We'll just round up,
Yep.
But from what I remember too, because somewhat similar as well, is we were kind of told this formula or this method to do.
Mm-hmm.
Read your Bible, pray, all of these things to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one struggle that we have and kind of our wiring is you need to tell us why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Why should I trust the Bible? Why should I even care about this book? And I put that in parentheses because it's really a compilation of text. It's not just one book. It's a compilation of texts.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I care about this thing?
Yep.
Why should I pray when it seems like what prayer is, kind of what we were taught is like, well, just kind of ask your requests for God to do stuff for you.
It's basically the same thing you do for Santa.
Yeah,
Just
or like
do
a
it
genie
to the
in a
one
bottle.
You don't send a letter to.
Right, things like that. And so, not to our parents' discredit, but it's like they're kind of doing what they were taught and just kind of kick the can down the road for a bit. But for us, there was a little bit more of a hunger. And from what I've read and studied is that there are a lot of us that were like that.
Mm-hmm.
The whole, not to date ourselves too much, but kind of the church growth movement, the only thing it really cared about was getting people in their doors.
Yep.
And hopefully keeping them there with really entertainment and coffee shops.
Yeah,
like,
that's what it was.
Yeah.
Fancy light shows, a little too much smoke on the stage, and loud music.
Right. But when, I remember that, and thankfully, at least the church that we went to, there was still a cross on the stage and whatnot. I just remember looking at it, what is that thing all about?
Mm-hmm.
Who is this guy 2,000 years ago? Why does all this matter? Why do we still sing to him? And it seemed like what I noticed as well is, sometimes a little bit like the blind leading the blind to a degree, where there were some pastors. I remember talking to them. It's like they didn't have any better answers than we did. I remember when I kind of saw that season of your life where you stepped out of the church and stepped out of and, claimed that you're an atheist and whatnot. And for me, I wasn't surprised by that, to be honest. I was a little nervous, not going to lie, but I wasn't surprised by that. But the one thing that always gave me hope about you was you seek truth. You're not seeking your own pleasure or your own gain. There's a difference where some people leave the church because they're like, I want to continue going on living this sinful life.
Yeah.
And that's sad, and we hopefully call them back. But there are some people that I leave this church, and I agree, I leave this local church because there's got to be more to this.
Yeah, and I mean, having some of the background that I do, the things they were talking about, realistically, for most people, these messages probably hit where they needed to hit.
Yeah.
And they were spoken to, I think, the back of the room. And I don't mean that in a volume level. It's like, you want to make sure everyone understands it. And I have always felt like this feels like it should be taught to children younger than me, even at a time when there wasn't children younger than me.
Yeah.
And I never really liked that, but having been afforded some of those sicknesses I had as a child and really facing life and death decisions, and not that I was making those decisions, but I was experiencing them, things about dating and things about, the morality of doing your homework or something like that. At the time, these lofty sounding Bible stories that never got articulated into a language I could really grasp onto, other than just being colorful pictures in my head. It just wasn't enough. It's like I've been through some shit, and these fart jokes that this pastor's making don't work.
Yeah.
These allegories about how when I was in school and it's like it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for me to realize it wasn't supposed to, because I wasn't like those kids. And that's not making me a better thing. It's like I've just been through other things.
Yeah.
And I think it served the purpose that it needed to serve. I just wasn't part of it.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. We're given all these topical things about, dating or, relationships. Well, let me tell you about this funny thing my dog did and how that somehow correlates to this one Bible verse that we're just going to sprinkle in there.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say...
I really wish you were straw manning because I could pick it apart, but that's literally what it was like.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how we both kind of deviated from the path to a degree, but pursuing a similar idea. Where at that time, where you kind of went outside of the church in atheism and whatnot, for me it was finding Reformed theology and finding the old creeds, you know, that Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed, Athanasian, like, and it just got me thinking, I'm like, there are a bunch of smart dudes that have thought through these things and things that actually matter. Because for you, matter of life and death is legitimate and real. You didn't need to hear about the pastor's dog and how that relates to this weird Bible verse.
Yep.
Like, you're literally fighting for your life. And what I realize is the good churches and the good pastors, no matter what denomination you're from, they understand that fact of life. And they speak truth and grace into those realities that are inevitable.
Yep.
Right? Where these topical churches that I understand what they're trying to do, appeal, trying to get people to come back to church and whatnot, there will get to be a point in their life where that's very nice at a more pragmatic view and a pragmatic level. They're not inherently wrong in what they're saying. But listen, there are real things that happen in people's lives. Yep. People die. There was an accident, you know, or maybe somebody committed suicide, or, you know, maybe your job got fired, and, you know, there are all these real problems.
Yeah.
And it's just these larger churches trying to appease the masses. But yeah, that guy that's in the back, he maybe just walked in, he's having a rough day or something like that, and he's like, well, maybe, hopefully I can hear some good in the church. Maybe, hopefully. And for me, I just want to give that guy the gospel like everybody else. And a good pastor does that. Speaks to the person in the back, to the person in the front, to the old lady to the left, to the young man in the right, to the family in the middle, all of them.
Well, and I think to give them their due, I think they did offer good, but what they didn't offer was any concept of suffering. You know, hell was just the place you went when you had sex before marriage. That was it, basically. Like, hell was when you fucked around and found out. That's where you went. That's it. I don't know. I remember thinking as a kid, it's like, I don't really know what hell is, but this feels pretty close. And I remember being a young kid and thinking that. So really needing something, basically an antidote to that, needed to be equally strong, if not more so, to quell what that felt like, what that was like to experience, and what that's like still to experience.
Like the man who conquered sin and death.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Right? Wouldn't that be nice to tell someone? But
Right. And I mean, there's a way to say it that's just like, okay, it's the same Bible stories I've heard since I was 3, since I was literate enough to understand pictures. But you really have to dig, and like, you really have to dig, because appeasing to the masses, I'm not the masses, and no one there is the masses. Really, they're individuals. They have their own stories. They have their own intricacies, idiosyncrasies, all these things. And I think the church did the best that they could. And I think for some people that may work. I was not one of them. That's all I could say. So I left the church and started finding people like Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris or name a new age atheist. I listened to him and was angry when listening to anyone else, and probably while listening to them too. Had my whole life figured out of, well, God doesn't exist, so death doesn't really exist in a way. Your life just sort of stops. Who cares? And I think that truth-seeking behavior in me of needing something more found nothing as an answer, basically. And I did spend a little bit of my life just like gratifying the latest thing. Whatever I wanted to do, I did it. It doesn't matter. You know, my parents would always say, like, well, we just think you're angry at God. And I'm like, there has to be one for me to be angry at it. And I was very adamant about believing there wasn't one. You know, and it's a pretty serious argument to make of like, if a loving God exists, why do children suffer?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why does anyone undeserving suffer? And I was one of those undeserving people. So I think looking back at it now, I can kind of see that rebellious stage of me as being like, I want to feel like I earned it. And I think that was a pretty strong force. It's like, I don't know what I did to earn it as a kid, but I'm going to make sure whatever comes after this, I earned it. I think for a couple of years, I felt like I earned it. I screwed up, and I screwed up big. That took, I don't know, that took a couple of years to kind of wear off.
Yeah.
And started finding better inputs. And, you know, during that season, you and I, you know, I don't want this to come, this podcast episode to come off as hunky-dory. We've been best friends our whole life and never had to run into anything.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's been kind of tough forever. But during that season in particular, I was like, I don't want anything to do with my friends from church. I think probably some of me felt judged and misunderstood, maybe warranted or not. We didn't communicate much at all. Like, you'd gotten close with my parents to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think you'd come out to hang with them and they'd mentor you a little bit. And I'd make distance.
Yeah.
I lived in a different city, couple hours away with a girlfriend for 6 months and made zero communication with anyone I knew previous to that, really, for that entire time until that tanked. Then I was home for a bit and then went to a different house a couple minutes away and didn't make much communication there either.
Yeah, I remember that. And that was kind of a strange season. I didn't really know what to think of it, as just wanted to be your friend, I guess, at that point.
Yeah.
No, and everybody, like you said, everybody has their own story to say and has their own experiences they got to go through. And it's hard to kind of to navigate that. But to kind of get back to the mission statement, to encourage to investigate the truth, or what was the sidebar? The truth for the common, or truth for the higher good.
Encourage individuals to investigate the truth for the sake of the good by exercising our inalienable right to free speech.
Yep.
So the reason I'm sharing all of this history is really to show this isn't just things have been easy.
Yeah.
They've always been easy, and here I am. I've read a couple books, and I'm just copying and pasting. It's like, it works. Because I've seen when I don't do it right, and I've seen how my life fell apart.
Yeah.
Because I made it fall apart. I wasn't positive that I hit rock bottom. I can picture a lot of rock bottoms, and I didn't quite hit there.
Yeah.
But I hit low enough for me to realize this is pretty serious, and I need to fix it. And that started the turnaround of finding better information, finding healthier friendships, reconnecting with old ones, and things like that. And man, I wish I would have known some of these things earlier, but I know them now.
Yeah.
And I think because I know them, and because you know them, and because we can discuss them, and to some degree, minus a couple bumps in the middle of the road, we've always been able to discuss them.
Yeah.
And we just figured, maybe someone else might need to know this.
Yeah, I remember one part of the season when you were kind of going through the rough patch, if you will. We were sitting down in the den. It was wintertime. It was a winter break, and I just asked you a question that I heard from a guy named Dr. Frank Turek, who I really appreciate. I don't really support his ministry anymore for other reasons, but I really, really appreciate what he does. And he says you got to ask to really get a sense of the person that you're talking to, if they're a true seeker or not, as you ask this a question like, if I can prove to you that Christianity is 100% true, would you become a Christian? And I remember that when I asked you that question, it was just something like, yeah, that's actually a really good question to ask. And so I asked you that. You had to pause for a second. And it was like the first time where I heard like a sense of hope and joy in your voice for a while. He goes, yeah, I would. And I said, well, great, because if I could prove to you atheism is 100% true, would you become an atheist? And we're like, yeah, of course. It's like, that's the point. The point is that we want to, as this mission statement, we want to encourage people to investigate the truth for the sake of the good, right? You know, as a Christian, right, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And outside of that too, we just want people to encourage to investigate and pursue truth, and to get them to understand that this is a good thing to do. This is a worthy endeavor. Because it's what will hopefully bring joy, purpose, understanding in your life, rather than just going from fling to fling and working at a mundane job to get, a measly income to buy the latest and greatest whatever. You know, what we're striving for here is, man, like we want to aim for something higher than this. And we also do that by investigating what's beneath the presuppositional level, the subterranean level of all of these things as well. And so pursuing the truth or investigating the truth for the sake of the good. If you pursue truth, I believe this, if you pursue truth, good is going to come about it. Now, that definition of good is not 6-figure income, perfect house, perfect wife, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe, you hope. I mean, God will give you the desires of your heart if you pursue him honestly and faithfully. But that pursuit of truth will be a good and noble thing to do at the end of the day. Yeah.
That's the only thing I'm firm in believing. All the other stuff I'm questioning to some degree. Not all of it. I shouldn't say all of it.
Yeah.
The pursuit of truth, that can't be wrong. You can make mistakes in how you do it, but in and of itself, it is right.
Yeah. It's a good and noble thing. And exercising that inalienable right to free speech, too. Here at the Townsmen Project is that, well, yeah, I mean, that's what we want to affirm.
Yeah.
Is you have this right, exercise this right, use this right. Now, of course, there are obviously caveats. You know that you can't go into a perfectly good building and yell there's a fire. Right? We want to preserve, we want to affirm, we want to encourage, and we want to exercise that free speech. And that's exactly what that free speech is investigating truth for the common good. And that's what these founding fathers, that's why they put it as in the Bill of Rights, number 1. So that's exactly what this is. Free speech, freedom of the press, to peaceably assemble, right? No establishment of a federal religion, all of that. And that's really what this Townsmen Project was kind of in. When we talked about that, I mean, you want to talk about, was it Thomas Paine and kind of the ideas that they had and really how, like, we kind of want to emulate that a little bit.
Yeah, it was towards the end of COVID. My father had just committed suicide less than a year before. And it seemed to me that church, society, all of those things really had no good paths forward, because it all seemed to be shifting the same direction. And I didn't like the direction it was shifting, but I didn't just want to sit here and cast stones at it without having a better alternative.
Yeah.
So I started reading a lot of the founding fathers' work, and when I got to like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Paine, those kinds of guys, understanding they worked at a printing press, or one of them did, I know Franklin did, and reading Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and that was just a printout that just got handed out to people of like, hey, turns out British rule is not the form of governance that we want, and we want something else. And also thrown in there, we need a big navy. And it was sitting there in May of this year, 2023, sitting in my very uncomfortable chair that I bought in the middle of COVID when they had apparently a foam shortage, and the chair that I spent $200 some on, and the cushion just went flat right away. Useless details, but I don't know, maybe people like that.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
A shortage of everything.
Sitting there, and it was like, wait a second, I could do that. I have friends who aren't as stupid as me, and they might be able to throw some knowledge out there that I don't have. So I came up with this, and originally the idea was for a printout that I'd go around and put in people's mailboxes, just good information, same thing we're trying to do, of like, hey, I'm not going to criticize the postmodernists and the neo-Marxists. I'll let you do that on your own, and I think it's warranted. But what I want to do is offer counter ideas that I think are better. So share things like, Benjamin Franklin's 13 virtues or something like that. Or good quotes from Theodore Roosevelt or John Locke or something like that. And just like, hey, these are real virtues. These are real things to shoot for, not whatever anti-racism is or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was after having a few conversations with the guys that we got this started with that I realized turns out putting unsolicited mail in a mailbox without going through the post office is illegal, and going through the post office is expensive. So this idea had to transform some, and ideas got thrown out. Do we start something akin to a Facebook page? Do we do a blog? Do we do a podcast? What do we do? And we landed on this for now. That doesn't mean the door is slammed shut on publications. That doesn't mean it's slammed shut on a website and all these other formats that we could share. But I have some audio background. I was a musician. I recorded some stuff, did all that kind of thing. Never released any of it. Don't get excited. Or, maybe it should be, don't worry that no one else has to hear that beyond myself and my poor computer who had to sit there and bear my terrible note playing.
Hey, you never know. It might be a gold mine, actually. You still have those?
It's not.
Oh.
It's not.
Hey, you never know. Everyone has different preferences.
Yeah, well, if the artists themselves think it's crap, then anyone that listens to it's just a fool.
Well, that's the whole point of modern art. You give it the purpose. You give it the value, right?
Modern art, man. All right, we're not going there.
No. Well, I mean, when it comes to the Founding Fathers, right, and a lot of their views and their beliefs and what their view of society is and whatnot, that's kind of what we're doing here is two things. The reason why it's called the Townsmen is exactly that. What we would like to see this is to be a community of people. Think of like a town that express their ideas freely, that have purpose, that have value, that are building things in their lives, that are living purposely, and that occasionally from time to time as a community we can come together, discuss ideas, negotiate things, work things out. And I remember when you pitched the idea of like, what are we going to name this thing? And you came up with the Townsmen. I'm like, that's really good because it kind of captures how we want to view this. This is for the townsmen. This is for the townspeople. Like, we're not here trying to get on, we're not trying to go down to Nashville and, get a record deal. Or, go to New York and find a jail on Broadway. It's like, this is for your everyday folks. These are for, you got someone, an older gentleman that like, oh, this is a pretty cool idea. Maybe I could join. Yeah. You got younger guys, you got people from different states. And it's just, I like that idea of like, we're the townsmen.
It's just by regular people for regular people.
One thing I really like is the symbol that we use now, or it's not a logo yet or anything like that, but the lighthouse. So if you could explain a little bit the methodology of why we chose the lighthouse, or
I'll just walk through kind of how I got to it. I've always been interested in the symbolism of like a rock in an ocean. It's like, it doesn't matter how bad the storm is or anything like that, that rock's not going to move. Now, on a long enough timeline, it'll move and it'll dissolve. But for the point being, it's just not going to move. And I tried for a while to model my life after that. It didn't go well. I mean, very disciplined, but
a stoic.
Pretty cold.
Yeah,
really.
Being a stoic, yeah.
So I thought, well, we could probably update that. And, having that idea of Lighthouse started to come to, especially when like my mom, for instance, her favorite Bible verse when I was a kid was Matthew 5:16, which I'm paraphrasing, basically like, let your light shine on a hill for all to see. And I like that idea. It's like, okay, assuming I have any light bright enough for anyone to see or want to follow, that I think seems good. And what does a light have to do with a rock? And it's like, oh, well, that's an easy connection to make.
Yeah, and I remember when you were pitching that idea, the picture and the visual that came to mind is, like you said, that rock in the ocean amidst the storm and whatnot. I just always pictured as, the world, there is a lot of storms that are going on. There's a lot of calm days, but there's also storms, there's fog, there's wind, there's rain, sleet, hail, and whatnot. And what's great about a lighthouse is it's built on a solid foundation, and what it's meant to do is to project that light out for those who are seeking either the shore, and also as a warning as well, right? The lighthouse, it's circular, it goes around 360, and what it does is it can reflect, oh, there's a reef there. Probably shouldn't sail over there. oh, there's a down ship over here. Let's go save that down ship. And kind of marrying those two ideas together is what we hope is that there's a community where we have this lighthouse where those who are maybe a little bit wayward, or those who have ideas, those who think they're alone, those who are amidst the storm, or maybe are honestly having a great time and they notice it and they want to stop in. It's like, here's a lighthouse of a community of people that are willing to share ideas, that are willing, that live hopefully purposeful lives, that are contributing for the higher good, that are pursuing truth, investigating the truth. And that's what that lighthouse is, I think, a good symbol of. Been there for ages. It's on a solid foundation. It works, right? And it's for that community and for those, people that are a little bit wayward, like, there's the light on the hill. Or, for those who have recognized that, because we don't want to be the only lighthouse,
right?
We encourage that if there's another lighthouse or another community or whatnot, maybe this branches off into other things, and that's good. We encourage and we want to pursue that truth, and I just think the lighthouse is a good reflection of that reality, built on a solid foundation.
It's basically saying, like, you're close to shore. There's dangers here still. You're out in chaos, and sometimes getting closer to something good can be dangerous on its approach. But it's like, okay, we'll help guide you in to some degree. That's what lighthouses do. They don't point to the ship and then point to the land and just keep doing that. Like, hey, follow that. That's not how they work. But it's a symbol of you're close to shore. Heads up, there's some stuff ahead. It kind of helps them orient their maps and their charts and things like that so that they know, okay, we got to go this way, we got to whatever. But I think what it does, most importantly, is it gets ships back safe. It gets sailors back safe so they can go out into it again. So they can take it on willingly because they know there's something back home that is going to help them back in when they're tired, when they're weary, when their mission's completed, whatever. When someone needs to rest. Rest and rearm, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. Lighthouse is usually always up, amidst the fiercest storm. It's still shining its light, and they don't move very easily. That's for sure.
Not particularly.
Unless the whole foundation crumbles. Yeah, and so when it comes to the lighthouse and the Townsmen, kind of our working mission statement, all that, to really kind of put a capstone on it, if you will, is we want to encourage you guys, really anybody here. If you have ideas that you've always wanted to share, you're welcome. If you're really wanting to work through something, or like, man, this is really frustrating me, why does this work, or why is this happening, or why can't I understand this thing, you're welcome here as well. We just want to encourage people to continue to dig deeper, to continue to just explore what this is all about. There is more to life than just finding hedonistic pleasures. I think that if we're created in God's image, our God is a reasonable God. He's a rational God. He's a thinking God. He is a creative God. And if we don't exercise those things, it just stifles our reason and our existence. It hurts us at the end of the day. And we welcome you if you're going through maybe a tough time and need some encouragement or an explanation or whatnot. We're here. Again, we're not counselors, we're none of that kind of stuff, but we're just a group of guys that we just want to have the conversation and continue the conversation for the sake of the good, and for truth, and for understanding, and to exercise that freedom of speech that we have, because we're so grateful that we live in a country that we do have that. We can continue to do that. We're glad you guys are here. We're glad you stopped by. Thank you for listening in, and look forward to talking to you guys next time.